Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another tops and flops video. As you might know, if you follow me on YouTube, at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month, I look back at my reading of the previous month and I pick the best and the worst, so to say, the tops and the flops. Mostly it's three in the tops division and one or two in the flops division. And this time we're talking about March. So let's see my tops and flops for the month of March. And we start off with the tops, as always, and with the best reread, because as you know, if you follow me, I try to reread more in 2019, and so far I'm not doing a bad job. And the best reread of the month was Mary McCarthy's novel The Group, first published in 1963. Now, if you've been following me on this channel for a while, you know that I adore and admire Mary McCarthy. She was an American novelist, essayist, art critic, social critic. She died in 1989, so it's the 20th century, and The Group is probably her most famous book. Did I mention it was published in 1963? I think so. The book follows a group of 8 women after their graduation from an elite college in the US in 1933 until the beginning of World War II. The chapters are alternating in point of view between those women, but it's a straightforward line in time, so we're not going back, if you know what I mean. We see the women having their first sexual encounter. There's quite a lot of sex in the book, and it's done really well. Marriage, motherhood, how to raise the first child, work experiences. So it's quite a range of topics that is explored, and the book gives us a really good picture of what the life of a certain class of women, white, educated, well-to-do women, because most of the women have rich parents. So how the life of this group of women was in the 1930s. But Mary McCarthy does that without losing sight of her characters. So every one of the women has depth and nuance. They are not cliche or cardboard figures just to, show us a certain topic. And they are quite different in personality. And McCarthy handles all these characters really well. She can write a group scene, a party scene, like nobody's business. I think it's amazing. And like I said before, there's a lot of talk about sexuality and sex, and there are sex scenes in the book that are really, really well done, which is, I think, quite an exception, because mostly sex scenes in books are not done that well. So this was a buddy read for me with Sean over at Sean the Book Maniac and Ange from Beyond the Pages, and I'm really happy to report that they also both loved the book. It was a first read for them, so I was a bit anxious, but they enjoyed it very, very much. If you have never picked up The Group, I can highly recommend it if you want to read about a group of women in New York in the 1930s. This is a perfect pick. My second book in the tops is the most surprising book of the month. You know, when you pick up a book not expecting to really like it and you end up loving it, that kind of surprise. And my March surprise was Melissa Broder's novel The Pisces, first published last year in 2018. And I picked it up because the book is now longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction of 2019. Melissa Broder is an American author. She is, I think, most famous probably for her collection of personal essays, So Sad Today, which she developed from her Twitter. Her Twitter handle, I will leave it down below, is So Sad Today, and she tweets these, short statements, aphoristic kind of, Anyway, the book is set in the present day, mainly in California, in Venice Beach, and we follow our main character, Lucy, who's a 30-something scholar. She has worked on her PhD on the Greek poet Sappho or not worked for 13 years. She just had a horrible breakup with her longtime boyfriend Jamie, and she sort of flees to her sister's house in California to babysit the sister's dog. The sister and her husband are quite well off, and they go on a business trip. And besides, Lucy's sister thinks that she needs, some time off to rethink her life, because it turns out that she will not receive any more funding for her PhD. So, everything sort of crumbled around her. Now, then once in California, Lucy has various encounters with men, with Tinder. She has a support group of sort of a self-help group where women come together who all have their problems. There's, like in Mary McCarthy's The Group, is a lot of sex, rather graphic and a lot of times gross, but it's still well written. And the core of the book is then because the Pisces, fish, Lucy meets a merman, so a male mermaid. She sits on a rock in the beach, and first she meets this man. She thinks he is a swimmer, and later on she realizes that he's a merman. They start a relationship, and then the question is that the kind of relationship that Lucy should have? What does it mean if Lucy wants to stay with the merman? Now, I read the book mainly, I don't know whether it's meant that way, but for me it was an absolute hilarious satire of modern women. Women don't come off well at all. I saw a lot of videos ranting about how cruel a Broader is to women, and that's true, but I thought it was hilarious. The way Broader picks apart certain topics, like trigger warnings and self-help, and the way women look at relationships, and also she picks apart sex and sexual relationships. I thought it was a fantastic satirical book of women in modern times. So the biggest surprise of the month, The Pisces by Melissa Broader. The third and final book in the tops is a memoir, and that is Anne Summers' book, Unfettered and Alive, which came out earlier this year in February, I think. Anne Summers is an Australian writer and feminist activist, and the book is a follow-up memoir to an earlier memoir she wrote, Ducks on a Pond, in which Anne Summers describes her childhood. And this one, Unfettered and Alive, is about her professional life from the start, when she starts working as a journalist in the 1970s up to the year 2015-16. Anne Summers was born in 1942, so she started working in her late 20s, and we follow her really up to her 60s. Now, I know Anne Summers. We are friends because we served on the board of Greenpeace together, but she describes in the book really the stages of her career. She, like I said, she started as a journalist in Australia. She then became an advisor in the Australian government. She moved to New York for a period of time. She became editor-in-chief of Gloria Steinem's feminist magazine MS. She then moved back to Australia, wrote a book, Ducks on a Pond, had her own online magazine. So the career Anne Summers had is really very varied. It's a well-written memoir. It's really engaging. I learned a lot about Australian politics, because she works in politics, and as a journalist she did cover a lot of politics. So it's really focusing on Anne Summers' career. And one of the things that I really loved about the book is that it showed me that, a female career, first of all, isn't a set thing. There are amazing career switches in Anne Summer's life. She took risks, not only moving country, but also switching careers in a surprising way. And that for me as an older booktuber, which was also really engaging to read, is that your career doesn't end once you hit 50. Anne Summers started a new career in her 60s. So all of that was really very interesting. I loved reading about the politics, but also about, Gloria Steinem's magazine and the struggles there. So the book is touching on the personal life as well. We get some snippets of Anne Summer's personal life, but like I said, the focus of the book is her career. So if you are interested in memoirs that mainly focus on relationships and the Sunday brunches with your besties, this is not the book for you. But if you're interested in reading about a strong, intelligent woman and her career in journalism and politics and beyond, then Unfettered and Alive is the perfect book. And I forgot to mention, Unfettered and Alive was also a buddy read. I read this book together with Jacqueline over at 6 Minutes for Me. She is Australian originally, although the first years of her life she spent in the UK. But she now lives in Texas. So we read this book together. I will leave a link to her channel down below. If you don't know her, please go and subscribe. Enough of the positive. Let's move on to the flops. And I have two this month, and the first one was my biggest disappointment, and that was Christina Dolce's debut novel, Vox, published last summer in August. Christina Dolce is an American author. She is a linguist by trade, working on the changes in language, mainly also Italian. She speaks Italian as well. She got her PhD in Georgetown. And Vox is a dystopian novel. It's set in the near future in the US. We're not exactly sure when, but it's the near future. And there is a very religious, fundamentalist regime now in power. And one of the things that happened is that women are cut down speaking. They are allowed 100 words a day. They have to wear a sort of a metal bracelet which counts the words they speak, and if they exceed their word limit of 100 words, they are given electric shocks. First, if you only 102 words, it's a mild shock, but it goes on to being lethal. So that's the premise of the book, and that was the reason that I picked up the book, because although I know, all these Handmaid's Tale revival books, you get tired, but I love a good dystopian. And I thought the premise was interesting because there is a lot to do about, women voicing their anger last year after the election, and trying to shut women up is a theme. And so I thought this premise of curtailing women's speech by limiting their word count to 100 was really interesting. And the first, I would say, 100 pages I really enjoyed, because it gives the background and what it means. We follow the main character, a former linguist, Professor Jean, who is married to Patrick, who works for the government, and they have 4 children, an older boy in his teenage years, Stephen, and then twin boys, and then a young daughter, 5 or 6 when the novel opens, Sonia. But then the novel sort of takes a turn that I thought was just, meh. Not bad, but meh. Jean is then recruited by the government in order to cure a certain disease, aphasia, that affects a certain area in the brain in which you can speak, but it's just garbled. So you're speaking nonsense. There's nothing wrong with your thinking, but you can't voice anything that makes any sense. And she had done research, Jean had done research before she wasn't allowed to work anymore and couldn't speak anymore. And she is now enlisted by the government to cure this disease. And then we go into a medical kind of thriller where Jean, also has a love affair, which is quite sweet, but not in a good sense. And, like I said, it's not a bad book, but I would have loved a book about this premise and not this kind of medical thriller that was, in the end, for me, just a bit meh. So, biggest disappointment of the month, unfortunately, Vox by Christina Dolce. And finally, for the flops, we come to the book that irked me the most. And that was Hale Butler's novel, The New Me, published earlier this year. Hale Butler is an American writer. I have never read any of her work. She published her first book, I think, 3 years ago. So this is her second novel. It's set in present-day US, and we follow our main character, Millie, who is 30-something, beginning of her 30s, working as a temp, in an office, and her boss sucks, female boss. She describes the way she has to, staple papers, and if she doesn't staple them from the left to the right, she's corrected, that kind of stuff. She has to pay the rent, and that is difficult because then she gets a fallout with her boss, and she is not a temp anymore, so the temping agency drops her. She has to find a new job, and there's a friend of hers who is a career woman, but she hates her job as well. They go on these, drinking binges together to bitch about work and their bosses and life. And that's all fine as a premise. But to read nothing else than that, work sucks, your boss sucks, paying the rent sucks, drinking sucks, and waking up with a hangover sucks. It's just incredibly boring. So I was irked in the sense, not that I hated the book because it was so bad, or because the premise was ridiculous or whatever, but it was just incredibly boring. There was nothing else but that everything sucks. Yeah, I don't know. If you read the book and you liked it, let me know what I didn't see. But for me, it was just, it was irksome to read it. Unfortunately, it was only 200 pages, so it was over pretty soon, but no. Anyway, so these were my 5 tops, 3, and flops 2 of the month of March. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments whether you read any of the books that I talked about, or whether you have any tops and flops in March that you want to share with me. And I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye bye.